3 years had passed since that autumn afternoon when Sarah Mitchell accidentally recorded the most private moment of two lives that belonged to the world. The footage remained buried deep in the palace digital archives, encrypted and forgotten. Sarah had left her position at the palace 6 months after that day, carrying the weight of what she had captured but never speaking of it to anyone. Life had continued for William and Kate. They attended royal engagements, smiled for cameras, and carried out their duties with the grace expected of them. But those who knew them well could see the subtle changes. Kate's smile sometimes seemed forced during long public events. William's jaw would tighten when reporters asked particularly invasive questions about their private life. The pressure had not lessened. If anything, it had grown stronger as the years passed. Every decision they made was scrutinized. Every photograph was analyzed for hidden meanings. The media followed their every move, always hungry for the next story. The next controversy. It's the next crack in their perfect facade. David Chen had been working in the palace's IT department for 2 years. He was a quiet man who loved technology and respected privacy. His job was to maintain the digital systems, update security protocols, and occasionally help staff retrieve old files from the archives. On a cold February morning, David received an unusual request. A documentary filmmaker had been granted limited access to historical palace footage for a project about royal architecture. They needed specific clips from the video archives dating back several years. David was tasked with locating and preparing the requested files. He spent hours going through folders, searching for the specific dates and locations mentioned in the request. The palace archives were massive, containing thousands of hours of footage from security cameras, official events, and routine documentation work. David was methodical in his search, opening folder after folder of video files. Most were exactly what he expected to find: empty corridors, formal ceremonies, staff meetings, and architectural documentation. Nothing particularly interesting or unusual. Then he found a file that did not fit the pattern. It was from the date range he was searching, but it was marked differently than the others. File name was simple, just numbers and letters. But it had been encrypted with a higher level of security than routine archive footage usually required. David's curiosity was piqued. In his experience, files were only encrypted at this level if they contained sensitive information. He debated whether to open it or skip over it entirely. The documentary team had not specifically requested encrypted files, and he was not sure. He had authorization to access them, but something about the file bothered him. Why would routine palace footage need this level of security? He decided to open it, telling himself he would just check if it was relevant to the documentary request. The video began normally. Empty corridors, typical palace interior shots. David fast-forwarded through the first few minutes, seeing nothing unusual. He was about to close the file when he heard voices. He stopped the playback and turned up the volume on his computer. Voices were faint, but clearly audible. David recognized them immediately. His hands began to tremble as he realized what he was watching. On the screen, Prince William stood against a wall in a palace corridor, his head down and his shoulders sagging with exhaustion. Princess Kate appeared in the frame, moving slowly toward him. David had never seen either of them look so defeated, so utterly human. David watched in stunned silence as the conversation unfolded. This was not a public appearance or official engagement. This was a private moment of pain and vulnerability that was never meant to be seen by anyone else. He heard Kate's voice, barely above a whisper, saying words that would later echo around the world. "I don't know how much more I can take." William's response was equally quiet, equally devastating. "Neither can I." David paused the video and sat back in his chair. His heart was racing. He knew he had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that could change everything. This footage showed the royal couple in a way the public had never seen them. Not as perfect figures on a balcony, but as two people struggling under enormous pressure. The conversation continued. David watched as William and Kate stood together in their shared pain, trying to find strength in each other while barely holding themselves together. There were no dramatic breakdowns or angry outbursts. just quiet desperation and the weight of expectations that seemed too heavy to bear. David realized he was holding his breath. He had worked at the palace long enough to understand the significance of what he was seeing. This footage would be explosive if it ever became public. It would humanize the royal couple in a way that could either generate enormous sympathy or create a scandal about their fitness for their roles. He watched the entire clip 3 times, each viewing revealing new details. The way Kate wiped her eyes when she thought no one was looking. The way William's hands shook slightly as he tried to compose himself. The raw honesty in their voices when they spoke about feeling like they were failing everyone who depended on them. David knew he should report the existence of this footage to his supervisors. It was his duty as a palace employee. But something made him hesitate. Maybe it was the genuine emotion he had witnessed. Or maybe it was his own understanding of what it felt like to be overwhelmed by expectations. Instead of reporting it immediately, David made a copy of the file. He told himself it was just for backup purposes, a routine part of his job. But deep down, he knew he was preserving something that might be important someday. Weeks passed, and David found himself thinking about the footage constantly. He would go about his daily work, maintaining servers and updating software. But his mind kept returning to that moment of vulnerability he had witnessed. He began to notice things he had never paid attention to before. During public appearances, David would watch William and Kate on the palace television feeds. He started to see the subtle signs of strain that the cameras usually missed. The way Kate's smile would falter for just a moment between photographs. The way William's eyes would grow distant during long ceremonies. David began to feel a strange connection to the royal couple. He had seen them at their most vulnerable, and now he could not watch their public performances without thinking about the private pain they were hiding. It was like knowing a secret that changed everything about how you saw the world. The documentary project was completed and delivered without incident. David had provided all the requested footage except for the one encrypted file, convinced himself that it was not relevant to their needs anyway. The filmmakers were happy with what they received, and no one questioned what might have been left out. But David kept the copy he had made, stored it on a secure personal drive, and locked it away in his desk drawer. He told himself he would probably never do anything with it, but he could not bring himself to delete it either. Months turned into a full year. David was promoted within the IT department and given more responsibilities. He moved to a different office and transferred his personal files to a new computer. The footage came with him, still locked away, but not forgotten. During this time, William and Kate continued their royal duties. They traveled the world, met with dignitaries, and supported various charitable causes. To the outside world, they appeared to be thriving in their roles. But those who looked closely could see the subtle changes that suggested the pressures were still taking their toll. Kate had developed a habit of touching her wedding ring when she felt stressed during public events. William had started speaking more quickly during interviews, as if he wanted to get them over with as soon as possible. These small changes went largely unnoticed by the media and public, but they were signs that the private struggles captured in that hidden footage were ongoing. David watched these developments with growing concern. He felt like he possessed a piece of the puzzle that could help people understand what the royal couple was really going through. But he also understood the potential consequences of revealing such private footage. The internal conflict was eating at him. Some days he would decide to delete the file and forget he had ever seen it. Other days he would think about how the footage might help people understand the human cost of royal duty. He was torn between his loyalty to the palace and his growing belief that the world needed to see this moment of truth, as David struggled with his decision. He had no way of knowing that events were already in motion that would soon take the choice out of his hands entirely. The palace corridors were quieter than usual that Tuesday afternoon. Most of the staff had finished their duties for the day, leaving only the essential security personnel and a few maintenance workers scattered throughout the massive building. The autumn light filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Sarah Mitchell had been working as a palace videographer for 3 years. Loved her job, though it often meant long hours and careful attention to every detail. Today she was finishing up some routine documentation work, recording empty rooms and hallways for the palace archives. It was mundane work, but someone had to do it. She adjusted her camera equipment and checked the battery level, almost full. Good. She had maybe 2 more corridors to cover before she could call it a day. Sarah walked slowly down the east wing, her footsteps echoing softly against the high ceilings. The camera rolled steadily, capturing the ornate decorations and pristine conditions of the royal residence. What Sarah did not know was that she was about to record something that would change everything. Prince William had been having one of the worst days of his life. The morning had started with a heated phone call from his father about royal duties and public appearances. Then came the meeting with palace advisors about media coverage that had been particularly harsh lately. Every decision he made seemed to be criticized. Every move was analyzed and judged. He walked through the corridors trying to find a quiet place to think. The weight of his position felt heavier than usual today. Sometimes he wondered if he was strong enough for all of this. The constant pressure, the endless expectations, the feeling that he could never be himself. William turned a corner and stopped. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes for a moment. He just needed a few minutes of peace. A few minutes, where he did not have to smile or wave or pretend that everything was perfect. Kate had been looking for him. She knew something was wrong when she saw him leave the meeting room with that particular expression on his face. She had learned to read his moods over the years. This was not just frustration. This was something deeper. She found him in the quiet corridor, standing with his head down. Kate approached slowly, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. She did not say anything at first. Sometimes silence was better than words. William looked up when he heard her footsteps. His eyes were red around the edges, though he was trying hard not to show it. Kate saw right through the attempt at composure. She had seen him like this before, but never quite this broken. "Hey," she said softly, moving to stand beside him against the wall. William tried to smile, but could not manage it. "Hey," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. They stood there together in the quiet corridor. Kate could feel the tension radiating from him. She wanted to help but did not know what to say. How do you comfort someone whose problems seem too big for any solution? Meanwhile, Sarah continued filming down the adjacent hallway. She was focused on getting good shots of the artwork and architectural details. The camera was professional grade with excellent audio capabilities. She had no idea that it was picking up voices from around the corner. Kate reached out and touched William's arm gently. "Talk to me," she said. William shook his head. "I do not even know where to start." His voice cracked slightly. "Sometimes I feel like I am drowning, Kate. Like no matter what I do, it is never enough." Kate felt her heart break a little. She had watched him struggle with the pressures of royal life for years, but he rarely let his guard down this completely. Usually he was the strong one, the one who held everything together. "I know," she whispered. "I know it feels like that." William turned to look at her, and she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. Not just physical tiredness, but something much deeper, the kind of weariness that comes from carrying too much for too long. "Do you ever think about what our lives would have been like if things were different?" he asked. Kate was quiet for a moment. It was a question she had asked herself many times, but never spoken aloud. Sometimes, she admitted, "I think about it a lot lately," William said. "Not because I do not love what we have, but because sometimes I wonder if we are strong enough for all of this." Sarah finished filming the artwork in her corridor and began to pack up her equipment. She was tired and ready to go home. As she wound up the camera cables, she noticed that the recording light was still on. She must have forgotten to stop recording. After the last shot, she pressed the stop button and began to review the footage quickly, making sure everything had recorded properly. The last few minutes showed empty hallway, which was normal. But as she listened through her headphones, she heard voices. Sarah paused the playback and turned up the volume. The voices were faint, but clearly audible. She recognized them immediately. Her heart began to race as she realized what she was hearing. Back in the corridor, Kate and William continued their conversation, unaware that their most private moment was being captured. I feel like I am failing everyone, William said, his voice breaking. The family, the country, you, especially you. Kate turned to face him fully. You are not failing me, William. You could never fail me. But look at what this life has done to us, he said. Look at the stress, the pressure. Sometimes I see you trying so hard to be perfect, and I know it is because of me. Because of this life I brought you into. Tears began to form in Kate's eyes. She had been holding back her own struggles for so long, trying to be the supportive wife, the perfect princess. But hearing William voice these fears made her own walls start to crumble. It is not your fault, she said, her voice shaky. None of this is your fault. Sarah sat in the empty room staring at her camera equipment.
Ow.
She could not believe what she was hearing. This was not meant for public consumption. This was a private moment between two people who were clearly struggling. She knew she should delete the footage immediately. It was the right thing to do. But something made her hesitate. Maybe it was the raw emotion in their voices, or maybe it was the realization that even royals were human beings with real problems. William wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, trying to compose himself. I am sorry, he said to Kate. I should not be falling apart like this. Yes, you should, Kate replied firmly. You should be able to fall apart sometimes. You should be able to be human. They stood in silence for a few more moments, both lost. In their own thoughts, the weight of their positions, the constant scrutiny, the pressure to be perfect all the time, it was taking a toll that few people could understand. Finally, William straightened up and tried to pull himself together. We should get back, he said. People will be looking for us. Kate nodded, though she did not want this moment of honesty to end. These glimpses of vulnerability were rare, and she treasured them even though they were painful as they walked. Away together, Sarah made a decision that would haunt her for years to come. Instead of deleting the footage, she saved it to a secure file and locked it away in the palace archives. She told herself she was preserving history. But deep down, she knew she had captured something much more powerful than that. She had captured the moment when two of the most watched people in the world revealed their deepest fears and struggles. The footage would remain hidden for years, buried in digital files that no one else knew existed. But secrets have a way of surfacing when you least expect them. The leak happened on a Tuesday morning at exactly 9:47 a.m. London time. David Chen was in a meeting when his phone began buzzing with notifications. Then his computer started displaying urgent messages from the palace security team. Something had gone terribly wrong with the digital archive system. A cybersecurity breach had occurred overnight. Hackers had infiltrated several government databases, including some palace files. David rushed back to his office, his heart pounding as he realized what this might mean. The first thing he checked was his personal drive where the footage was stored. It was gone. The hackers had not been looking for that specific file. They were after financial records and official correspondence. But in their digital rampage, they had copied everything they could access, including archived footage that should never have seen the light of day. Within hours, the stolen data began appearing on various websites and social media platforms. David watched in horror as news outlets started picking up the story. At first, it was just reports about the security breach itself. Government officials scrambled to assess the damage while cybersecurity experts worked to trace the source of the attack. But then someone found the video. The first person to notice it was Emma Rodriguez, a freelance journalist who specialized in royal news. She had been going through the leaked files looking for anything newsworthy. When she came across a video file with a timestamp from several years ago, the file name meant nothing to her, but something made her click on it. Emma watched the footage 3 times before she fully understood what she was seeing. This was not official palace video or a planned documentary. This was something far more intimate and devastating. She could see immediately that William and Kate had no idea. They were being recorded. Emma had been covering royal news for over a decade. She had written countless articles about official engagements, fashion choices, and public appearances. But she had never seen anything like this. It's the raw emotion, the vulnerability, the complete absence of the polished image. The world was used. To seeing her first instinct was journalistic excitement. This was the story of a lifetime, the kind of exclusive footage that could define a career. But as she watched the video again, Emma felt something else entirely. She felt like she was intruding on a private moment of genuine pain. The conversation between William and Kate was heartbreaking in its honesty. Emma could hear the exhaustion in their voices, see the weight of their responsibilities crushing down on them. This was not scandal or drama. This was two people quietly breaking under pressure that most could never understand. Emma sat at her desk for hours, staring at the video file on her computer screen. She knew she had to make a decision that would affect not just her career, but the lives of two people she had never met but felt like she now knew intimately. She called her editor, James Morrison, who had been working in media for 30 years. James was known for his tough decisions and his ability to spot a major story from miles away. Emma knew he would want to publish immediately. "James, I need to show you something," Emma said when she arrived at his office. "But I want you to watch it completely before we talk about what to do with it." James was intrigued. Emma was one of his most reliable reporters, and she rarely sounded this serious about anything. Settled into his chair as Emma played the video on his computer. James watched in complete silence. Emma could see his expression changing as the footage progressed. The initial curiosity gave way to surprise, then concern, and finally something that looked almost like guilt. "Where did this come from?" James asked when the video ended. Emma explained about the cyber attack and the leaked files, carefully, occasionally asking questions about the source and the timing. He was thinking like an editor, considering all the angles and implications. "This is huge," James finally said. "This changes everything about how people see them." "I know," Emma replied. "But should we publish it?" This was never meant for public viewing. He had no idea they were being recorded. James leaned back in his chair. In his 3 decades in journalism, he had faced many ethical dilemmas, but this felt different. The footage was undeniably newsworthy, but it was also deeply personal and private. "The thing is," James said slowly, "this footage shows them as real people dealing with real problems. Maybe the world needs to see that they are human beings, not just symbols. Or maybe it will destroy. Maybe some things should stay private, even for public figures." They spent the next 2 hours debating the decision. James argued that the footage was already out there, leaked by hackers. If they did not publish it, someone else would. At least they could present it with context and sensitivity. Emma worried about the invasion of privacy and the potential impact on William and Kate's children. She imagined how she would feel if her most vulnerable moment was broadcast to the world without her consent. Finally, James made the decision. "We publish it," he said, "but we do it right. We provide context. We talk about the pressures of royal life and the human cost of public service. Strength, not their weakness." Emma felt sick to her stomach, but she understood the logic. The story was too big to ignore, and if they did not handle it responsibly, someone else might sensationalize it instead. They spent the rest of the day preparing the article and deciding how to present the footage. Emma wrote carefully, trying to balance the news value with respect for the subjects. She focused on the broader implications about royal life and public service rather than treating it as gossip or scandal. Meanwhile, David Chen was having the worst day of his professional life. He had been called into multiple meetings with palace security and legal teams. Although the breach was not his fault, he felt responsible for not reporting the existence of the footage when he first discovered it. David knew that once the media found that video, everything would change. He had watched William and Kate struggle with their roles for years, and now their most private moment of vulnerability would be exposed to the entire world. At 6 p.m. that evening, Emma's article went live on the news website. The headline read, "Royal Couple's Private Struggle Revealed in Leaked Palace Footage." Within minutes, the story began spreading across social media platforms. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The video was shared thousands of times. Within the first hour, news outlets around the world picked up the story. Television programs interrupted their regular scheduling to discuss the implications, but the reaction was not what anyone expected. Instead of scandal or criticism, the dominant response was sympathy and support. People were not laughing at William and Kate or questioning their fitness for their roles. Instead, they were relating to their struggle and admiring their honesty. Comments flooded social media from people sharing their own experiences with pressure and expectations. Mental health advocates praised the footage for showing that even the most privileged people can struggle with emotional challenges. Emma watched this response unfold from her office, feeling a mix of relief and continued anxiety. The story was being received better than she had feared, but she still worried about how William and Kate would feel when they learned their private moment had become public. At Kensington Palace, advisors were working frantically to assess the situation and plan a response. William and Kate had not yet seen the footage that was now being viewed by millions of people around the world. The palace was in crisis mode. Outside the gates, something unexpected was happening. People were gathering not to protest or criticize, but to show support. They brought flowers and signs expressing sympathy and understanding. The leaked footage had done something unprecedented. Instead of damaging the royal couple's reputation, it had made them more relatable and human than they had ever been before. People were seeing them not as distant figures on a pedestal, but as two people doing their best under extraordinary circumstances. As the evening news programs began covering the story, it became clear that this was not just a royal scandal. It was a moment that would change forever how the public viewed the monarchy and the people who served it. 2 weeks had passed since the footage changed everything. William and Kate had not made any public appearances during this time, choosing instead to stay close to home while they processed what had happened and planned their response. The palace had released only a brief statement acknowledging the leaked video and asking for privacy while the family dealt with the situation. But the world had not moved on. If anything, the conversation had grown deeper and more meaningful. Mental health. Organizations were using the footage to start important discussions about pressure, expectations, and the need for emotional support. Universities were holding seminars about authenticity in public life. Therapists were reporting increased appointments as people felt more comfortable seeking help. The footage had become more than just a viral video. It had become a catalyst for conversations that society had been avoiding for too long. William stood at the window of his study, looking out at the crowds that had been gathering outside the palace gates every day since the story broke. Even there were not typical royal watchers or tourists. These were people who had come to show support, to share their own stories, to connect with two people they had never met, but somehow now understood. Kate joined him at the window. They watched together as a young woman placed flowers near the Kate then stood for a moment with her head bowed. She was crying, but it did not look like tears of sadness. It looked like relief. "She looks about the same age I was when we got married," Kate said quietly. William nodded. He had been thinking a lot about their younger selves lately, about the people they had been before the weight of their responsibilities had settled so heavily on their shoulders. "Do you think we would have made different choices if we had known how hard it would be?" he asked. Kate considered the question carefully. "I think we would have made the same choices, but maybe we would have been kinder to ourselves along the way." That afternoon, William and Kate made a decision that surprised everyone, including their own advisors. They decided to break their silence, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of a formal statement or press conference, they chose to visit a mental health center in London that had been receiving increased attention since the footage was released. The center's director, Dr. Michael Foster, has been working with young people struggling with anxiety and depression for over 15 years. He had seen the positive impact that William and Kate's accidental honesty had on his patients, and he had written to the palace to share these observations. When William and Kate arrived at the center, there was no media announcement or formal protocol. They simply walked in, introduced themselves to the staff, and asked if they could speak with some of the patients. The first person they met was Rebecca, a 19-year-old college student who had been struggling with severe anxiety about meeting expectations. She had seen the leaked footage and felt less alone in her struggles for the first time in months. "When I saw the video, I realized that even people who seem perfect from the outside can feel overwhelmed," Rebecca told them. "It made me understand that my feelings are normal, not a sign that I am weak or broken." William sat across from Rebecca. In the center's common room, "I want you to know that those feelings you heard in the video, They were real. We were not performing or trying to make a point. We were just two people who were struggling, and I'm glad that somehow our struggle could help you feel less alone." Kate nodded in agreement. "Sometimes I think we spend so much energy trying to appear strong that we forget strength can also mean being honest about when we need help." They spent 3 hours at the center, talking with patients, staff members, and families. Each conversation was different, but the theme was consistent. The footage had given people permission to be honest about their own struggles and to seek support when they needed it. Dr. Foster walked with them as they prepared to leave. "I have been working in mental health for many years," he said, "and I have never seen anything have such a positive impact so quickly. You have started conversations that we have been trying to start for decades. I never intended for this to happen," Kate replied. "But if something good can come from what felt like the worst thing that could happen to us, then maybe it was meant to be." As they drove back to the palace, William and Kate were both quiet, processing the afternoon's conversations. They had expected to feel exposed and vulnerable meeting with people who had seen their most private moment. Instead, they felt connected and understood in a way they had never experienced before. That evening, they made another unprecedented decision. They chose to record a personal video message, not through official palace channels, but using Kate's personal phone in their private sitting room. The video was simple and unpolished, showing them sitting together on their sofa, speaking directly to the camera. "We know that everyone has seen footage of us that was never meant to be public," William began. "At first we felt violated and embarrassed. But over the past 2 weeks, we have learned something important from all of you." Kate took over. "Your letters, your messages, your stories have shown us that we are not alone in struggling sometimes. And more importantly, you have shown us that being honest about those struggles can help others feel less alone too." "We are not perfect," William continued. "We make mistakes, we feel overwhelmed, and sometimes we need support from each other and from the people who care about us. We think that is probably true for everyone." Kate looked directly into the camera. "If you are struggling with pressure, or expectations, or feeling like you are not good enough, we want you to know that those feelings are normal. And we want you to know that it is okay to ask for help." The video was only 3 minutes long, but it felt more authentic and personal than any official royal communication had ever been. They posted it on social media platforms without any palace approval or media strategy. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the video had been viewed millions of times. Comments poured in from people around the world sharing their own experiences and thanking William and Kate for their honesty. Mental health helplines reported a significant increase in calls from people seeking support. The video had given many people the courage to reach out for help they had been too embarrassed or afraid to ask for previously. Emma Rodriguez, the journalist who had first published the leaked footage, watched the video from her apartment. She felt a complex mixture of emotions. She was proud that her decision to publish the story with sensitivity had contributed to such positive outcomes. But she also felt the weight of having been part of exposing such a private moment. She decided to write a follow-up article about the unexpected positive impact of the footage, focusing on the mental health conversations it had sparked and the increased willingness of people to seek help. David Chen, the IT worker who had first discovered the footage, also watched the video. He had been struggling with guilt about not reporting the file when he first found it, wondering if he could have prevented the leak. But seeing the positive outcomes, he began to wonder if everything had happened for a reason. Meanwhile, palace advisors were having mixed reactions to William and Kate's increasingly independent approach to communication. Some were concerned about the lack of traditional protocol and media strategy. Others recognized that the authentic approach was resonating with the public in ways that formal statements never had. The senior communications advisor, Margaret Thompson, had been working with the royal family for over 20 years. Never seen anything like the current situation, where a potential scandal had transformed into a movement for mental health awareness and authentic communication. "They are writing their own rules now," she told her team during a morning meeting. "And somehow, it is working better than anything we could have planned." As the days continued, it became clear that William and Kate had found a new way to connect. With the public, their willingness to be vulnerable and honest had created a bridge between the royal family and ordinary people that had never existed before. The leaked footage, which had initially seemed like a disaster, was transforming into one of the most positive developments in modern royal history. It was showing that authenticity and vulnerability could be more powerful than perfection and formal protocol, but the most significant changes were still to come. As William and Kate began to understand that their accidentally public moment of vulnerability had given them a new purpose and a new way of serving the people they had sworn to support. William was in his private study when his private secretary knocked on the door. The look on her face told him immediately that something serious had happened. She handed him a tablet without saying a word, her expression a mixture of concern and something that looked almost like pity. "Sir, you need to see this," she said quietly. "It went live an hour ago." William looked at the screen and saw his own face staring back at him. For a moment, he did not understand what he was looking at. Then he realized it was a video, and he was watching himself from several years ago, standing in a palace corridor. Looking completely defeated, his heart stopped. He knew exactly when this footage was from. He remembered that day perfectly because it was one of the lowest points of his life. The day he had felt like giving up everything. The day Kate had found him falling apart in an empty hallway. William watched in horror as his most private moment played out on the screen. He could hear his own voice, cracked with emotion, admitting fears he had never spoken aloud to anyone except Kate. He could see himself at his most vulnerable, stripped of all the royal composure he had spent years perfecting. "Where is Kate?" he asked, his voice barely steady. "She is in the nursery with the children. She does not know yet." William closed his eyes and tried to breathe. In a few minutes, Kate would learn that their most intimate conversation had been seen by millions of strangers. Her children would eventually see their parents at their weakest moment. The whole world now knew exactly how much they had been struggling. He walked quickly to the nursery, trying to prepare himself for what he would have to tell his wife. Kate was reading to their youngest when he appeared in the doorway. She looked up and smiled, but the expression faded when she saw his face. "What is wrong?" she asked, immediately standing up. William asked the nanny to take the children to another room. When they were alone, he showed Kate the tablet. He watched as her face went through the same stages of shock and recognition that his had. Kate sat down heavily in the small chair she had been reading from. She watched the entire video without saying a word. William could see tears forming in her eyes as she listened to her own voice saying things she had never meant for anyone else to hear. "How many people have seen this?" she asked when it ended. "Do not know. Millions, probably. It is everywhere." Kate put her head in her hands. "The children. What about the children? They will see this someday." William sat beside her and took her hand. "We will get through this. We always do." Privately, William was not sure how they would recover from this. Their carefully maintained public image had been shattered in the space of a few hours. Everything they had worked to protect about their private life was now public knowledge. Within hours, the palace communications team was in full crisis mode. They had dealt with scandals before, but nothing quite like this. Usually they could control the narrative, or at least spin the story in a favorable direction. But how do you spin genuine emotion in private pain? The team gathered in the main conference room to discuss their options. Some advisors wanted to deny the authenticity of the footage. Others suggested claiming it was taken out of context. A few recommended ignoring it entirely and hoping it would fade from the news cycle. But as they monitored the public response throughout the day, it became clear that this was not a typical scandal. The reaction was unlike anything they had seen before. Instead of criticism or mockery, the dominant sentiment was sympathy and support. Social media was flooded with messages of understanding and encouragement. People were sharing their own stories of struggling with pressure and expectations. Mental health organizations were praising William and Kate for inadvertently showing that emotional struggles affect everyone, regardless of their position in life. Dr. Sarah Williams, a psychologist who specialized in public figures and mental health, was interviewed on several news programs throughout the day. She explained that the footage showed a healthy response to overwhelming pressure, not weakness or failure. "What we see in this video is two people supporting each other through difficult times," Dr. Williams said during one interview. They are not having a breakdown. They are having a human moment. The fact that they can be honest with each other about their struggles is actually a sign of strength. These expert opinions helped shape how the public viewed the footage. Instead of seeing failure, people began to see resilience. Instead of weakness, they saw authenticity. Emma Rodriguez had been monitoring the response to her article all day. She felt a mixture of relief and ongoing anxiety about the decision to publish. The footage, the positive reaction was encouraging, but she's still worried about the personal impact on William and Kate. Late that evening, Emma received an unexpected phone call. It was from someone who identified themselves as a palace staff member, though they would not give their name. "I wanted to thank you," the voice said, "for the way you handled the story. You could have sensationalized it, but you did not. You treated them with dignity." Emma was surprised by the call. She had expected criticism from palace sources, not gratitude. "I was worried about invading their privacy," Emma admitted. "Did invade their privacy," the caller said honestly, "but you did it with respect, and maybe it needed to happen. Maybe people needed to see that they are human." The caller went on to explain that palace staff had been watching William and Kate struggle for years. Many had wished there was a way to help the public understand the pressures the royal couple face daily. "They never complain," the staff member said. "They never show how hard it is. Maybe this will help people understand what public service really costs." Meanwhile, letters and emails were pouring into Kensington Palace from around the world. People were writing to express their support and share their own experiences with mental health challenges and overwhelming pressure. A teacher from Manchester wrote about feeling the same way when she started her job, overwhelmed by responsibility and afraid of failing her students. A doctor from Scotland shared his experience of breaking down in a hospital corridor after losing a patient, and how his colleagues' support had helped him continue. These letters created an unexpected connection between the royal couple and ordinary people. The footage had shown that even the most privileged individuals face emotional challenges, making William and Kate more relatable than they had ever been. The palace staff members who sorted through the correspondence were amazed by the volume and the tone of the messages. Instead of judgment or criticism, letter after letter expressed understanding, sympathy, and admiration for the couple's honesty and vulnerability. Some people wrote about how the footage had encouraged them to seek help for their own mental health struggles. Others said it had helped them understand that showing emotion was not a sign of weakness, but of humanity. As the evening wore on, William and Kate remained in their private quarters, trying to process what had happened to their lives in the space of a single day. They knew that tomorrow they would have to face the world knowing that everyone had seen them at their most vulnerable, but they also began to see the messages of support that were flooding in. Their private secretary brought them a selection of the letters and emails that arrived throughout the day. Kate read through several of them, tears streaming down her face. "Listen to this one," she said to William, and began reading aloud. From a letter written by a young mother who had struggled with postpartum depression, "Seeing you both support each other made me realize I do not have to face my struggles alone," the letter read. "Thank you for showing me that it is okay to not be okay sometimes." William was quiet for a long moment after Kate finished reading. "Maybe something good can come from this," he said finally. "Maybe," Kate agreed, though she was still processing the shock of having their private moment exposed to the world. Neither of them knew it yet, but their lives were about to change in ways they never could have imagined. The footage that had initially seemed like a disaster would eventually transform not just how the public saw them, but how they saw themselves and their role in the world. 6 months had passed since that Tuesday morning when the world first saw William and Kate at their most vulnerable. The leaked footage had fundamentally changed not just how the public viewed the royal family, but how William and Kate saw themselves. And their role in the world? They were preparing for their first major public appearance since the video had been released. It was a charity gala for mental health organizations, an event that had been planned long before the footage emerged, but now carried much deeper significance. Kate stood in front of the mirror in their bedroom, adjusting her dress. She looked the same as she always had before public events, but William could see something different in her eyes. There was less anxiety, less of the forced composure that had become second nature over the years. "Are you nervous?" he asked, straightening. His tie-dot. Kate considered the question. "Yes, but not in the same way I used to be. I am nervous about speaking well and representing the causes we support. But I am not nervous about being perfect anymore." William understood exactly what she meant. Footage had freed them from the impossible burden of appearing flawless at all times. People had seen them struggle, and instead of losing respect, the public had connected with them more deeply than ever before. The car ride to the venue is different from their usual pre-event preparations. Instead of reviewing talking points in protocol, they talked about the letters they had received that week. The father had written about finally seeking therapy after years of struggling with depression. A young woman had shared how the footage had helped her understand that asking for help was not giving up but moving forward. When they arrived at the gala, the response was unlike anything they had experienced before. The applause was warmer, more personal. People were not just showing respect for their titles, but genuine appreciation for their humanity. During the cocktail reception, guests approached them differently. Conversations were more real, more honest. A businessman talked about the pressure he felt to never show weakness at work. A teacher shared her experience with burnout and how she had learned to set boundaries. Emma Rodriguez was covering the event for her news outlet. She watched William and Kate move through the crowd and noticed how naturally they connected with people now. Formal barriers that had always existed between royalty and ordinary citizens seemed to have dissolved. "They look happier," she wrote in her notes. "More present, more engaged. The weight they carried before seems lighter now." When it came time for the speeches, William and Kate took the stage together. They had decided to speak without prepared remarks, something that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. William spoke first. "6 months ago, the world saw us in a way we never intended. We felt exposed and vulnerable, and honestly, we were scared about what people would think." The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. "But you taught us something important," he continued. "You taught us that sharing our struggles does not make us weak. It makes us human. And being human is the most important qualification for the work we do." Kate stepped forward. "That day in the corridor, I felt like I was drowning under expectations and pressure. I thought that admitting those feelings would mean I was failing everyone who believed in me." She paused, looking out at the faces in the audience. Many people were crying quietly. "But your responses showed me that honesty about our struggles can help others feel less alone in theirs. Every letter you sent, every story you shared, reminded us that we are all fighting battles that others cannot see." William rejoined her at the microphone. "We want to use our platform differently now, not to present a perfect image, but to show that it is okay to not be okay sometimes. And it is always okay to ask for help." The applause that followed was not polite or formal. It was heartfelt and sustained. It was coming from people who felt genuinely moved by what they had heard. After the event, William and Kate walked through the quiet palace corridors together. They passed the exact spot where the footage had been recorded. Years earlier, both of them noticed, but neither mentioned it directly. "Do you ever think about that day?" Kate asked as they walked. "Sometimes," William replied, "but not with regret anymore. I think about how alone we felt then, and how connected we feel now." They had reached their private quarters. Before going inside, Kate turned to look back down the corridor where their lives had changed forever. "I used to think that showing vulnerability would make people lose faith in us," she said, "but it did the opposite." Over the following weeks, the impact of their new approach continued to grow. Mental health organizations reported unprecedented increases in funding and volunteer applications. Schools were implementing new programs to teach children about emotional well-being. Workplaces were starting conversations about pressure and support. David Chen had been promoted to head of digital security at the palace. He often thought about the role he had played in the story. Still feeling conflicted about keeping the footage when he first found it, but he could see the positive changes it had brought about, and he began to believe that sometimes accidents could lead to important outcomes. Sarah Mitchell, the original videographer who had accidentally recorded the footage, learned about its release through news reports like everyone else. She had moved to Australia after leaving the palace and was working as a freelance documentary filmmaker. When she saw the story, she felt a complex mixture of emotions. She was relieved that the footage had been received positively and had helped so many people. But she also felt responsible for having recorded such a private moment in the first place. Sarah decided to write a letter to William and Kate, explaining how the recording had happened and apologizing for the unintended invasion of their privacy. She never expected a response, but 2 weeks later, she received a personal note from Kate. "Thank you for your letter and your honesty," Kate had written. "While we never wanted that moment to be public, we have learned that sometimes the things we fear most can lead to the greatest good. Your accidental recording has helped millions of people feel less alone in their struggles. We hope you can find peace in knowing that." Emma Rodriguez continued to cover royal news, but her approach had changed significantly. The experience of publishing the leaked footage had taught her about the responsibility that came with sharing personal moments, even when they involved public figures. She wrote a series of articles about the long-term impact of the footage, following up with people who had been inspired to seek help or make changes in their lives. The stories were powerful testimonies to how authenticity and vulnerability could create positive change. 1 year after the footage was first released, William and Kate established a new foundation focused specifically on supporting people dealing with pressure and expectations in their personal and professional lives. They called it the Authentic Self Foundation, and its mission was to promote honest conversations about mental health and well-being. The Foundation's first project was a series of videos featuring people from all walks of life sharing their experiences with pressure, failure, and recovery. William and Kate appeared in the first video, sitting in the same corridor where their original conversation had been recorded. "This is where it all started," William said in the video. "This is where we learned that being honest about our struggles was not something to be ashamed of, but something that could help others," Kate added. "We hope that by sharing our story and the stories of others, we can create a world where people feel safe to be authentic, to struggle, and to ask for help when they need it." The video ended with them walking together down the corridor hand in hand, no longer afraid of being seen as imperfect or human. The leaked footage that had once felt like their worst nightmare had become the foundation for their most meaningful work. It had shown them that true strength came not from hiding their struggles, but from sharing them with honesty and compassion. In the end, the accident that exposed their most private moment had taught them the most important lesson of their public lives. People did not need them to be perfect. They needed them to be real. And in being real, William and Kate had found not just a new way to serve, but a new way to live. The footage would never be forgotten, but it was no longer seen as an invasion of privacy or a moment of weakness. It had become a symbol of hope, authenticity, and the power of vulnerability to create connection and healing in a world that desperately needed both.